So I saw someone say, why don't they ever teach African history in our schools? And I had to pause because it's not that they can't teach it. It's that they don't want to.
Hey lovelies, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Belinda Strana. Thank you so much for all the love and support. To my returning subscribers, to those people that share my videos, leave commentaries, and also educate each and every one of us, you guys are the real MVP. So lovely. I came across this video on my For You, and I thought to share where some group of Pankala people are actually questioning the land ownership of some native Namibians. Like, you all know that I am someone who is very invested in history, and I found this very, very knowledgeable, and I decided to put up here. I'm just going to roll the clip as well as some of other stitches I was able to put together. Please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We are just here for educational and informative purposes. So lovelies, want us chill and let's learn this history that is never taught in school.
This girl is questioning if the land belongs to native Namibians. This video has me seeing red. Please watch it.
I'm from Namibia, born and raised. They want the land back? How? Sorry, but that's just, I mean, really? It's not even their land. If they wanted their land, then they should have done something 100 years ago. And who's to say that the land originally even belonged to them? For all we know, there were people before them there who they took the land from. So
the audacity and entitlement alone from settlers, not only in this video, not only in Namibia, but around the world, is quite despicable, laced with the lack of understanding and empathy, driven by pure ignorance and, let's face it, racism. And it's quite telling because the number your ancestors did, I mean, enslaving, war, so killing, we just say colonization, but that's what it means, right? And your lack of understanding to truly understand that and to be huffing and puffing in a video like this, don't get me started. This girl.
So I saw someone say, why don't they ever teach African history in our schools? And I had to pause because it's not that they can't teach it. It's that they don't want to, especially when it makes Europe look like the monster that it really was. So let me put you on to something you probably didn't learn in school. Germany's first genocide didn't happen in Europe. It happened in Africa. The year was 1904. Germany had colonized what we now call Namibia. And when the Herero and Nama people resisted, not violently, just refused to be erased, Germany responded with brutality that'll make your stomach churn. They poisoned wells. They pushed entire communities into the desert and cut off their access to food and water. They built death camps. They chained people up, used them for forced labor and medical experiments, even beheaded them and shipped their skulls back to Berlin, all in the name of research. Not as evidence of war crimes, but trophies. Sound familiar? Because it should. Germany tested their genocidal playbook on African soil before the Holocaust. And then they exported that same cold, calculated violence to Europe decades later. But nobody talks about that, likely because Black pain isn't considered historic. It's considered disposable. And don't let anybody tell you this was a long time ago. Germany didn't even acknowledge what had happened until 2021. And their apology came with no real reparation, just a PR stunt and a press release. They still haven't returned all the stolen bones. They haven't paid back the families that lost generation. They still haven't put this genocide in German textbooks. And the US, silent. Because when the West says never again, they really mean never again to white people. But when you ask why African history isn't taught, they can't teach you the truth without admitting that they're still protecting the people that committed the crimes. Germany practiced genocide in Africa. They perfected it, then pretended like it started in Europe. We're not supposed to remember, we're supposed to move on. But memory is resistance. And I'm here to say their silence doesn't protect them anymore. We remember everything. And the ancestors, they haven't forgotten either.
Germany colonized Namibia from 1884 to 1914.
So in 1904, an indigenous Herero chief, Samuel Maharero, decided he'd had enough and he revolted against the German colonizers. On the 11th of August 1904, Maharero and his army were defeated at the Battle of Waterberg. And it's this defeat that marked the start of the genocide against the Namibian people. The German general Lothar von Trotha then began what he called an extermination order against the indigenous people of Southwest Africa. It's not a genocide that's widely spoken about, not like the Yahtzee one, even though 100,000 Namibians were unalived in the most atrocious ways, as well as essayed. So this was mainly against the Herero and Nama people, who were people that were indigenous to the land. But it affected the San and the Damara communities as well. And then to add insult to injury, of course, they took their land. So even to this day, white farmers of German descent still own the majority of commercial land in Namibia. This was the first genocide of the 20th century. So this is why it would be no surprise why Germany would be backing It's Not Real, and why Namibia would be heavily criticising It's Not Real, because they understand the effects of genocide and how long-lasting those effects are. Skulls and bones of these people are still in museums now. Literally now. So like, as if it wasn't enough that their bodies were desecrated back then, they're still being desecrated now. The 28th of May 1904 marked the day when the last of 5 concentration camps were closed in Namibia, and this year was the first year that this genocide has been marked and commemorated since 1904. So that's why I just wanted to mention it before the month was out and pay homage to Chief Maharero and his army for their bravery in trying to set Namibia free.
Most people have never heard of this genocide, and it's not an accident. Between 1904 and 1908, Germany carried out one of the deadliest colonial massacres in Africa, decades before the horrors of the 1940s Europe. The victims, the Herero and Nama peoples of what's now called Namibia. Germany had colonized the area and was seizing land, abusing local communities and forcing them into labor. When the Herero and Nama people fought back, the German army responded with a brutal extermination order. Entire families were forced into the desert to die of thirst. Those who survived were thrown into concentration camps. Yes, real camps, used long before the ones many learn about in European history. By the end, up to 80% of the Herero and half of the Nama population had been wiped out. Germany only officially recognized this as a genocide in 2021, but descendants are still waiting for meaningful reparations. Did you know about this genocide? Comment below. Let's talk about the African history they don't teach us. This is the Africa you're not shown, but I'm here to show you.
You know that Namibia was an experimental site for the Holocaust. You probably didn't, because African pain doesn't make the textbooks. Germany's first Holocaust was not in Europe, it was in Africa. When the Herero and Nama people repudiated their erasure, the Germans responded with cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity. The Germans poisoned wells. They forced entire communities and tribes into the desert and cut their access to food and water. They chained people up, used them for medical experiments and forced labor. They built death camps. And Germany, despite having living evidence of what they did, only issued an apology in 2021. This brings me to my main point. Europe's collective insistence on refusing to take accountability for the part they have played in African suffrage is the reason why they continue to propel their cycles of violent history today. Child labor in the Congo is a modern rendition of King Leopold. Economic extortion inflicted by the French franc is a modern rendition of French imperialism. And don't even get me started on the Commonwealth, cause ain't nothing a bigger scam. We need to tell the stories of African pain to impede the cycles of African suffrage.
for Germany to accept that they have committed a genocide in Namibia. Number 2, for Germany to apologize. And number 3, for Germany to give reparation.
Did you know that Namibia was
didn't spontaneously invent concentration in the Third Reich. 1940 gave us Auschwitz, 1937 Buchenwald, 1933 Dachau. But 1905 gave us the prototype, and it was called Shark Island. We don't often talk about Shark Island in the broader story of the 20th century. It doesn't appear in many textbooks, and it's not part of Germany's cultural memory in the same way that other aspects of our past are. But Shark Island was, by all accounts, one of the first true camps of the modern era, and it was German. At the turn of the 20th century, Germany was a rising colonial power. It controlled vast parts of Africa, including what it called German Southwest Africa. Under German rule, indigenous peoples were pushed off their land to make way for settlers. Their cattle were confiscated, their leaders humiliated, their traditional ways of life outlawed, and forced labor became common. Women were mistreated, families displaced, and any resistance was met with brutal collective punishment. In 1904, the indigenous Herero and Nama people rose up against the brutal colonial regime. This wasn't some sort of spontaneous rebellion, but a final act of defiance after years of dispossession and abuse. The German response was swift, and unfortunately, General Lothar von Trotha issued a so-called Vernichtungsbefehl, an explicit extermination order. The Herero were driven into the desert to die of thirst. Survivors were rounded up, so were members of the Nama, and they were sent to the worst of these camps was on Shark Island. There was no fresh water, no sanitation, food rations were scarce, disease rampant, and beatings common. Men, women, and children were forced into labor, building railways, offloading cargo, collecting guano, and they died in the thousands. Shark Island, which is actually not really an island, was pretty small, barely more than a rocky outcrop of the coastal town of Lüderitz. It was windswept, sun-scorched, and fully exposed to the Atlantic, and so it offered no shelter, no vegetation, and no natural resources. Prisoners were housed in tents and makeshift barracks, and there was no protection from the elements. Sandstorms were frequent, and so were beatings. German guards were under very little oversight, and they were given wide latitude in how they enforced discipline. And so for many, the island functioned as a slow-motion execution site, a place of deliberate neglect and humiliation where death was expected, not prevented. German anthropologists later collected skulls for racial science. Some were shipped back to Berlin and ended up on display there. This was not some accident in history, but engineered dehumanization. Shark Island was chosen in part because it was remote, barren, and difficult to escape. Its isolation amplified suffering and erased visibility. This is something we always want to be on the lookout for in the broader context of history. Physical distance is used when we need to erode accountability. When you move people out of sight, it becomes easier to ignore what's happening to them. At Shark Island, Herero and Nama people were described in explicitly dehumanizing terms. Savages, subhuman, animals, and remember that dehumanization always precedes abuse. Language is never just rhetoric, it's always psychological permission. And Shark Island was fully operational. It had quotas, labor logs, researchers, and orders. Cruelty becomes normalized when it's papered over with bureaucracy. Systems often begin with necessary containment, where places are built for undesirables or threats or outsiders. They are often framed as temporary, protective, and legal, and then they metastasize. Decades later, when Nazi Germany built its vast networks of camps, some of the methods, ideas, and even personnel had roots in the colonial era. Historians like Jürgen Zimmerer and David Olusoga have documented the connections. It's not so much that there was a direct line from Shark Island to Auschwitz, but there was a cultural and bureaucratic memory of sorts. And you know, that complicates things a bit because we like our moral narratives clean. Evil arrives, evil is defeated, lessons are learned. But Shark Island complicates that story. It tells us that the machinery of genocide is not born in a single moment of madness. It evolves on the margins, where the world isn't watching, and it's tested on those who are deemed expendable. It tells us that the HC, as singular as it was in its scale and ideology, did not come from nowhere. When we tell the stories of the 20th century, we need to include those that came before it, especially those that were silenced. Shark Island is not a footnote. It's a blueprint, and it's a warning. Germany didn't spontaneously...
Like, seriously, love this. It's very, very unfortunate that in 2025, these colonizers are still colonizing. Like, these guys will never get tired. So I was just going through my For You, and I came across a video where some, Pe.Ple more specifically was asking or talking about how the Namibians are not the owners of Namibia, like the native Namibians are not the owner, you know. And she even goes as far as to talk about how she is the real Namibia, like they are the indigenous people. And I keep asking myself, at the cost of me trying to know some historical facts that I was never taught, I was never told about, and not upon all of the stitches I'm doing here, and I've learned a lot. And I was like, a genocide happened in Namibia by these German people. And it's not even something that was even taught. I never knew about this. I came to know about all of these other holocausts and how Germany have a very big role to play with Namibians and Africa and all of that, all because of I saw this pan-colored woman questioning the land ownership of Namibians or Namibians. And I get to realize that these people really did a whole lot. And how was this even possible? How was colonization possible? How were they able to colonize everywhere? Everybody. Like, I keep asking my grandfather. I'm someone that actually grew up with my grandfather. I used to ask my grandfather, what happened? I thought you said that the first people that ever existed in the planet Earth was black people. So why was it even possible for them to be colonized? These guys really did a whole lot. The Jane Orseys and all of that. The land claiming lands here and there. They still do the same thing in South Africa. They still do the same thing in majority of all of these African countries. They will just pretend as if they are going for some gospel. They are going for to share the gospel. I have seen so many of these, pastors go to far away in Africa, especially they will look for an African country. This is what I do, like in 2025. I've seen so many of these stitches. They'll look for some African countries that is so poor and try to tell you that they are here to share the gospel. Like, this is how they do it. This is how they colonize in 2025. They'll just start up about telling you how they want to share the gospel. From sharing the gospel, they're already trying to look into your natural resources. Is that why even till date Burkina Faso is in jubilee? Because Burkina Faso have hid their chest and say that they don't want to be colonized anymore. They don't want their natural resources to be stolen from, especially France. And now Burkina Faso is in is in a lot of pain because these people wouldn't allow these people to live their life in peace. And this lady talking about how they are the real owners of Namibia because they try as much as they can to hide the history, to not to let you know people to get to know history or not to allow them to be taught in school because you want the truth to be hidden so as you can come out on a social platform to talk about how Namibia is your birthright. Like, oh my god, these European people, oh my goodness. This is something they're just doing everywhere, every given where. And to the last person I stitched her video, I think she's a German woman, and she was talking about this all this alligator, Alcatraz, and all of that. And I just thought about the alligator Alcatraz that we have right now, that these immigrants are being held. Immigrants are being locked up in alligator Alcatraz. It's not even something that started today. When they say that history is repeating itself, I think the person that actually said that is not wrong. It's as if we all went back to the days. We all went back. Why I don't want history to be taught in school is that they want the history to repeat itself. Because when history is being taught, it will give the opportunity for these histories not to repeat itself. But the reverse is the case. They don't want it to be taught in schools. They don't want you to know about it because they want to repeat it so that you won't be all, oh my God, what is happening? Is this not what we were taught that happened during the days? This is exactly why I felt that I don't want histories to be taught in school. But seriously, lovelies. Well, this woman is all out. Oh my God, Namibia. Oh, anyways, please wanna just leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We're just here for educational and informative purposes. So that please, if you've not subscribed, do your girl a huge favor to click on the subscription button. And I will see you lovelies when I upload the next one. To click on the subscription button, like, and I will see you lovelies when I upload.